closer, it was very hairy, but it had the arm of a man. 7.5 to 8 feet tall. Its eyes, very like ape-like, was its nose. It kind of had like a bridge almost. It seemed a bit more like a person to me. Everything else seemed very...
Part of what I do and absolutely love about my job is that I get to interview users about their experience with different things. I then take all those interviews, I extract all the little comments they said, and then I use those comments to make the product better. So I went to visit one of my closest friends in Chicago not too long ago. He and I, we've known each other for a very long time. We have some very interesting interests. One thing we've always been kind of curious about is like that so-called like cryptid monster stuff. So I was talking to him, and he said that he has a friend who had an actual experience. Like he saw Bigfoot or something like that. So I was thinking, what would happen if I gave his friend a UX style interview? Here's why I think that'd be interesting. UX interviews are designed to ask unbiased, non-leading questions, and it's designed to understand what the user's experience was rather than getting their opinion. In other words, it's about find out what they actually do or what actually happened rather than what they think may have happened. And at the same time, it can start to paint a profile of the person that you're talking to. So this is definitely going to be the weirdest thing I've ever done with my UX career. But you know, I think it's a bit of a weird challenge. I'm interested to see how the process works with it, and I think it'll be super interesting. So, you know, enjoy.
Recording in progress.
Hello there.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hey, Jonathan. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, man.
So, Steve, this is my friend Jonathan. From he's had his own encounter of the first kind, if you will.
And thank you, Jonathan, for carving out the time for this. I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. Like I was
So,
telling Evan, I haven't really talked about this much with people, so this is one of the first opportunities. So
first off, this happened in Florida. Is that where it happened?
yeah, it happened in Florida, like I want to say around 99.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. How long did you live in Florida?
Oh, about 13 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which part of Florida?
In like the central Florida area, a little under, it was in a town called
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I've been plenty of times.
Right.
We're probably gonna be going there. Actually, we're going there in August. We're going.
Really, actually, I'm going there in September, like actually like second week of September. Yeah,
Oh,
for some
okay.
vacation.
Oh, we're just gonna miss each other then.
Yeah, one coming, one going.
Yeah, yeah. So what what was your age when you lived in Florida? What was your age range?
Uh, I left. I mean, I was born there, but I
Oh, okay,
left.
gotcha.
Yeah, but I left like when I was 13.
Okay.
So then came to...
Tell me what you know about like the subject of Bigfoot and stuff. Like what's some of the stuff you already know?
Well, before not much. Afterwards, a lot more. um, I know about the variants that there are, the Yahweh from Australia, the of course Yeti, and kind of just some behaviors and kind of just certain features of like footprints and like the dermal ridges and um, uh, certain um, certain anatomical features as well. So I've gotten much more into it since then. And it's just always been a subject that I was interested in because it just left such an impact on me.
Yeah, gotcha. So how do you teach yourself about the subject? Like
Oh, internet.
internet,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Oh yeah. I mean, and after that, I started reading other sightings as well, just to
Mhm.
kind of see and um, almost re-experience it and see what kind of connections there were, what similarities there were, and a lot of it did, you know, sound familiar as well. Um, and yeah, it's just been through those kind of things, um, and I think it was also partly to remind myself or to kind of make myself realize this was something that did happen. Because at first I want like after time had passed, I wondered if it was like if I had actually, you know, if I had actually seen what I had seen, but but no, it did happen.
You kind of already mentioned this before, but you didn't do any research beforehand before this happened.
Oh no, I was a little kid. No,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't really. I was just like enjoying life, as it
Yeah.
were, at that time, just living in the moment.
Yeah.
How
Um,
old were you exactly?
oh, I was like 6 or 7.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was very young.
So, yeah, tell me about your experience then.
So yeah, I lived in a cul-de-sac, um, and there was my parents' house, and then there was my grandma's house that was right next door to us. And it was the encounter happened behind my grandma's house. She had a lot of woods around there, and just a few yards past the woods, there was a lake that we had. Um, and so it was on an afternoon month. I can't remember exactly too well. I want to say maybe more towards like summer break or so. I was outside of our house just shooting some hoops, and I'm friends with a couple of the kids that were there, that lived in the cul-de-sac, and we would just play with each other and um, all the time. And while I was just shooting hoops, then I hear my friends screaming, and I would hear them screaming all the time, though, just playing and what have you. So I didn't think anything too much of it, but it did sound a bit more like out of fear. So um, it that did kind of throw me off a bit. But when I saw them running out from behind my grandma's house, then they were talking about they had seen something big, that they thought it was like a monster or something. And I didn't really believe them because, I thought they were just trying to mess around. And so I kind of ignored them, and they were very persistent about it. So that did pique my curiosity because they just wouldn't let go of it. And so I decided to go. But none of them wanted to come with me. They were just too scared. And so I went back by myself, and I went through the woods. I could see a bit of like the shimmer of like the afternoon sun on the lake. And what what I noticed first was a smell. It was almost like a kind of like a bog, almost like maybe like rotting eggs, or um like rotting leaves almost. It wasn't really pleasant. And then when I got closer, I did hear like some trickles of water, like a splashing almost. And so I started to make out a shape um, towards my left, and I started slowing down because the closer I got, the more I realized I thought that was an animal at first, but it just seemed the proportions seemed strange. But what really caught my eye and what made me stop was seeing that it was very hairy, but it had like the arm of a man, and it was scooping water, and it was drinking it. And it did that for just a few seconds. And then I guess it heard me and it turned. And that's the moment I won't forget, that with the sun was hitting me, and you know how animals, like, they have that reflective membrane when you see them, and that's kind of how it was there, where it was kind of more like a orangish red color that I just saw. But our eyes locked for a few seconds, and it just felt like everything else around me disappeared. It was just, we were the only two things that existed. And it stopped drinking water, and it just kind of stood frozen. And what I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was, I think we're both trying to figure each other out. Like, it looked scared, and I was very scared. And just seeing how it was kind of big. It was, I almost want to say, it was hunched over because it was crouched getting the water, and when it lifted itself up a little bit. But I would say maybe it was like 7.5 to 8 feet tall, maybe. And I could just, even though it was for a few seconds we locked eyes, I could tell certain features of it. Like, its eyes were very like ape-like, and just like very low brow, of course a lot of hair. But what kind of made me realize it wasn't like full ape, at least what I was used to, was its nose. It kind of had like a bridge almost. That seemed a bit more like a person to me. Everything else seemed very much more ape-like. And I was only able to get those few details in, and then all of a sudden it just turned and bolted. It just ran off. And the minute it moved, I ran off as well, because I didn't know what it was going to do. I just heard it running, and it had very long arms, the way it ran as well. And it was a lot of low-hanging vegetation, so it was kind of crouched as well, and it was just went off. And I was scared, and I started screaming, and I went running back, and I went back to my friends, and there's my brothers were by that time out with their friends playing shooting hoops, and I tried to tell them the same thing. They didn't believe me, and so ever since then I was terrified for a good while. I would have nightmares of seeing that thing, and little by little I was able to go back to that place. There's nothing that I saw. I never did see it again, but that's when I started researching into it and wanting to understand what I saw. And as time went on, I discovered I think it's called BFRO .net. I think that's where you have a whole collection of different sightings. And some of the things that convinced me even more of what I saw was that, and I don't know if it's any correlation with it, but in that area there had seemed to be a string of sightings not far from my town. And so I wondered, well, could that be the same thing? I don't know. But ever since then, I started watching as many documentaries, the good and the bad, and the hokey. I would just consume any kind of literature I could find, and or videos, reports, all of that kind of stuff. And to this day, I have such an interest in it. And I'm a really big paleo nerd, like Evan is. And so part of me is just fascinated by the idea of, where it would fit in the, phylogenetic tree of things, like where would it belong, or, and I'm fascinated by even the stories of different cultures, thousands of years And I just find it fascinating that all these different cultures are separated by continents, have very similar stories even before settlers came here. And so and even just seeing evidence of like dermal ridges and how it's differentiated from humans and even apes. And so just from my mere experience, even if I didn't have it, I would believe there's definitely saying they're definitely seeing something. But now that when I had my experience, it I saw what I saw. So yeah, ever since then, it just left a big impact on me.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Well, I've definitely got questions, but go ahead, Steve.
What? Tell me about the things that you could hear when it happened.
Things I could hear. So I could hear, kids playing in the distance. I could hear, of course, my own footsteps with the leaves crunching. But of course, I could hear the splashing of water, the trickling of water, of like something being scooped up, and that's what caught my attention of which direction to look at. And I could see that figure behind vines and branches, and as it kept scooping until it spotted me and it stopped. And I can't recall it making any particular sound. It looked like it was just frozen. Like I think it was actually scared of me as I was of it. And it just darted off, and that's when I heard the rapid footsteps of the leaves being crunched and just branches and vines. And but outside of that, I don't remember any particular sound that it made, at least towards me or anything.
Yeah. Okay. And there was nobody with you?
No.
Not at that particular spot, at least.
Yeah, no.
And
just my friends who had saw it more earlier than me.
Gotcha. What did they feel it was when they saw it?
I don't think they really knew what to make of it. They just thought it was a monster or something, which for that reason I didn't really believe what they told me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have much knowledge on the subject of Bigfoot. Like I said, I was a kid, so but I don't think that they really could. I don't think they really comprehended what they saw either.
Gotcha. What time of day was this again? You mentioned
Yeah, this was about in the late afternoon, not twilight, because the afternoon sun was still out. It was all golden, and I could see the ripples of the water from the lake in the back. The kids were already either out of school or we were on summer vacation. But yeah, it was around that time, so maybe 6, maybe. But I'm just guessing there.
What exactly do you believe it was that you saw?
Honestly, it fits the description of what people think of as a Bigfoot. I mean, if I were not closer to it and if it didn't turn to me, I could think, oh, it's maybe someone in a suit. Maybe someone's trying to pull a prank. But what convinced me was seeing that face and seeing those eyes. I don't know, that would be really an elaborate mask or some, prop to use to just capture all those details, the wrinkles and the eyes itself and just the bridge of the nose and all of that. Like, I just have no other explanation for it, and what's it, that Sherlock quote, um, how does it go? The whatever's left, whether it
Yeah.
be probable or improbable must be the truth.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever's left must be the truth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only thing I could imagine. And then when I started researching it, and it just fit the description, every little thing just kept fitting it. And I'm like, I don't know what else it could have been, because a bear cannot scoop water like that. And I mean, even the face, you know, I would have believed anything else if I just saw the back of it and it never turned and just ran off. But because it faced me and I see those details, I have no other explanation.
Gotcha. How far away? How far away was it from you?
Ooh, I would say about maybe 10 feet. Maybe 10 feet.
That close?
Yeah. Yeah. Probably around 10 feet or so.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, it was.
Did you did you um did you feel a certain way or anything?
When I saw it,
Yeah.
I felt my body go rigid. Like I was horrified. I think I was horrified because I had no idea what I was looking at. Like my mind couldn't put it together. I think it was like trying to fit so many images, because I love nature. I would love to go out. I would always be out, and I would also love to watch nature documentaries. I was always obsessed with it. So, and even like wildlife, getting to know what things are poisonous or venomous or what things are not. And um, I was very much into that. So I think my mind was just trying to mesh every image that it's seen before, and it just couldn't. And I think that's what partly scared me, because I just couldn't understand what I was seeing. It looked, or it had aspects that reminded me of a person, but I knew it was far from that. I knew that was very different. That was not human. So I just remember my body tensing, feeling my heartbeat, and just when I locked eyes with it, everything else around me, like it just felt like a tunnel vision. Nothing else existed. Any other sound that there was just completely felt muted, and I just was looking at that face, and that was it, like just for a few seconds. And I just didn't know what to do. And then once it did run off, then the spell broke, and I just ran off, and I ran as fast as I could in case like it would try and get me or something. I just didn't know what it would do. So, and I was just horrified even to this day sometimes. And I think Evan was can attest to this. We've been camping before, um, and he wanted to take me out into the wilderness, not even in a tent or anything. And even then, it kind of gives me some PTSD. And even just hearing like a branch snap or something, it just kind of sends me back to it, and it really freaks me out. Like I try and reason, if it's out there, it's an animal. Like it's like any other animal. It's not trying to get you. So it's I'm fascinated by it, and I love hearing and reading about it. But I do have a little PTSD with that. just ever so slightly.
So you mentioned that you've considered that could have been a person in a costume. You mentioned that you considered for a brief second that it could be a bear. that some are there what other alternatives have you also considered?
I just I couldn't think of any. I mean, it looked somewhat like a person, but it definitely wasn't. So that was out of the question. I would have thought maybe a costume, because I thought, well, my friends are trying to mess with me. Maybe one of their, I don't know, siblings, dressed up. But the size of it also just, and then again, just seeing that face, it just didn't register. It just couldn't have been that. Like I said, if it was a person, it was very elaborate. I mean, I don't know if anyone could have in my neighborhood or could acquire something like that. Maybe from Hollywood, I don't know. But it just, my mind kept rejecting it. Any other possibility I saw, it was just too close to deny it.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me more about where this happened at. I apologize if you don't have to repeat any details you've already said.
Oh no, it's fine.
But yeah, tell me more about where this happened.
Yeah. So it happened south of a town called. I'd been raised there. We've been there for 13 years, but it was at the more south. I'm trying to remember exactly, like map it out in my mind of where I lived of the town. So it was about southeast of the town. We were kind of more closer to the border of the town, and beyond that, you get to an area called, which is a lot more country, a lot more cypress and palmettos and so forth. Which there's been some sightings there too, but yeah, it's there's some houses here or there, and at that time there was less development going on, but it was somewhat suburban. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and then on one other side there was another neighborhood, but at the end of the cul-de-sac and up until my parents' house, it's a lot of woodland around there. I had an aunt that lived at the end of the cul-de-sac, who would feed an alligator there. Named him Coco. She couldn't distinguish.
What is this, Lake Placid?
She pretty much was. She was Betty White. And she couldn't tell the difference between a alligator and crocodile and just called him Coco. Would feed him on occasion. But that was a different pond to the one where my grandma lived. But it's a lot of woodland beyond that point. I don't know if that's still the case now. But yeah, there was a lot of neighborhood kids. We had like some orange trees in the back right before you get into the woods. We had tangerines, tea tree bushes and stuff like that. So they would frequent, like either picking them and stuff like that. But they never mentioned anything to me about seeing something unusual. But yeah, that's about the area. Yeah, how it was.
Gotcha. Okay. And so you had mentioned that the way you got there was your friends had seen it and they were screaming and you went to go check it out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because they kept pressing so much about it. Like other times, if they were to try and prank me, it wouldn't last long. Like they would just say, oh, we're kidding or whatever. But they kept being so adamant about it, and they looked scared. So I was curious, and I went back there. Neither one of them wanted to come with me, so I just did on my own. And maybe that's what made it more scary.
How much time elapsed do you think between your friends running out of the wood and you seeing the creature?
uh I'd say about mm, 4 minutes, maybe.
Hmm.
Maybe. I'd say around there. It wasn't too
Did any of
long.
did any of your friends say what the creature was doing when they saw it? Was it also drinking?
I don't think they went as close as I did. I think from what the little bit that they said was that it was just black and I think hairy, but I don't think they could even really they really could distinguish what it was they saw. I think they didn't stay as long as I did, even though I was only there for uh, maybe full minute max. Um, yeah, I don't know if they went as deep. I don't think they stayed as long as I did either.
Did you ever talk with your friends about it since the moment, since the encounter?
Uh, we had mentioned it just because we're more scared of going behind there, because sometimes we would go there to either get oranges together, or there was like this old car as well that corroded over the years, and sometimes we'd hang out there. They wouldn't go back there again, but I think as time went on, and maybe it's from talking to other people, I don't know, but I think they maybe reasoned to themselves, oh, it was probably nothing. But then again, I don't think that they saw nearly as much as I did, and they certainly weren't as close as I was. So I think maybe for them, they could maybe make more excuses, because like how I said, if I had just seen the back of it, I could say a lot of scenarios like, oh, it was probably just a bird or maybe a bear or what have you. But because I saw it face to face, then that's a different story. I don't know what other excuse I could use.
Gotcha. Does your you said this was your grandparents' house?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they still live there?
They don't anymore. My grandma's in a retirement home. It's still in the same town, but
Yeah.
just in a retirement home now.
Gotcha. And so what do you may have already said this, but your friends, do you stay in touch with your friends to this day, those friends that saw it?
Technically no. After we moved out of there, some years later, though, we went to a different house, still in Florida, still in that town, but it was a lot more of a classic, subdivision. And we lived there for a few years, and then eventually we made our move to. We were more, playmates and everything, but everyone kind of just went their way, though. Maybe one or two of them might still be living there. Last time when I went to Florida, because I always like to go back to that neighborhood, just partly for nostalgia, but also to kind of, think back on that time. And it seemed that one of them still lived there. So I don't know if they'll have the same impact that I did. But it seems like there's one of them is still there at least. But yeah, I do tend to go there whenever I can if I visit Florida.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't suppose it'd be possible at all to contact some of these playmates and interview them, huh?
I would have to do some digging. Um, I do remember the names still, um, but um, but yeah, it's not like I have, the contact information or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Would did they I mean, did you ever talk about it with, I mean, you said you left Florida when you were 13, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, did they ever have any impressions about what they saw? You may have already mentioned it, but did they ever say what they thought it was, or did you ever tell them, "Oh, I think it was like a Bigfoot thing," and did they ever say, "Oh, yeah, that sounds about right," or anything?
Well, I think what happened was that because I was young and still we didn't have internet at that time, for instance, I couldn't really
Yeah,
uh, investigate it until a little bit later.
gotcha.
Um, so I couldn't really say, "Oh, was that a Bigfoot that we saw?" Just because I wasn't really exposed to anything like that yet. Um, we had mentioned it here or there, but I think as time went on, maybe for them, um, they seem to have gotten over it a little bit faster, and they would go back to going towards the woods and everything. Um, I did as well, more cautiously than them, but I would go back. Um, but for a little while, it was talked about, and they were interested in what I had to say. But um, I think just in our environment, like any mention of that was just quickly brushed off, like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. Um, I never mentioned it to even my own siblings, because I don't think they'll think, well, you probably confused it with something, or, oh, uh, that's the ape man missing link evolution, like that's so although my dad was actually a little later, I had mentioned it to my dad, and he's a bit more like, oh, like he's a bit more inclined to believe me in that. My mom, she doesn't know what to think about it. But my dad seemed a bit more interested in, you know, he's always had a fascination of that kind of stuff. So he seemed a bit more inclined to believe me.
Gotcha.
Did you tell your grandmother?
Did I tell my grandmother? Mm, maybe, but she's a very pragmatic woman. I don't know if she
How old were you when you were first able to do research on it?
I would say maybe in my late preteens, early teens. I would say maybe early preteen. Yeah.
So this
So,
was so it took some years then before.
oh yeah.
So what kind of, I guess, put you on that path? Like what was it that made you, like, did you stumble upon something, or did you just start searching for stuff, or?
Well, that image never left my mind. I think it may have started when eventually um, I was exposed to a documentary on TV that talked about it, and then that just completely caught my attention. And now I could place a name on it, because I didn't know it. It's like when you experiencing some symptoms, you don't know what it is until finally you get a diagnosis. That kind of felt the same, that I finally could put a name on it and what it was. And I loved, watching, like I said, animal documentaries and Animal Planet and all that kind of stuff. And so it kind of felt like an extension of that. And then I started looking up pictures, if there were any, or if there were, reports. And I just kept digging and looking and reading different stories and testimonials, and just being surprised how far back these kind of sightings go. And I also reasoned to myself, well, okay, I know certain things in the past that could resemble that existed a couple thousands of years ago. I don't know if they would have any connection to with what I saw. I thought, well, okay, you know, we do have bears in Florida. They eat meat. They, eat fruits and such, and they're pretty big animals. Could it sustain a creature like that? I thought, well, I mean, if it could sustain bears, and if there's even Florida panthers, they could probably sustain that. And I also reasoned, well, upon researching, the southern variant seems to be, just by comparison, a little smaller than, I guess, the famous Pacific Northwest variant, or Canada, and all that kind of stuff. And that seemed to fit the description as well. 7 feet, maybe close to 8. And, and then even coming upon, like, certain evidence with the footprints and all that, like, it just started slowly convincing me more and more that, not necessarily justifying, but of confirming of what I saw,
Gotcha. What what makes you think that it was like you're able to what were you able to gauge to like guess that it was 7 or 8 feet?
Well, my brothers can be pretty tall. I mean, they're still young at that time, but I mean, right now, my brothers are both like close to 6'5". So they're pretty tall. And at that time, maybe they were like 6 feet exactly. So I based it on what I knew, what was, at that height, like of 6 feet. And I could tell it looked bigger and lankier than them. So that's why I could tell, because I thought for a split second in my head, this is someone in a costume. But then when I see how tall it is, that seemed to go out of the question as well. And it's just, it had long arms, and the way it had it bent, I eventually, as time went on, and I was thinking, still the question would come, maybe I saw something, maybe I missed it, and maybe it is someone in a costume. But just that length of arm and the bend, because if it was someone in a suit, the bend would be like, of where it normally would be for a person, but its bend was like way over here. And to have that bend and to have that arm, it, unless you have some kind of mechanical instrument, I guess, to be able to move it in that way. And the more I kept researching, even the movement, I recall the movement, not only just swinging its arms when it dashed off, but the way it turned, it didn't go like a person would just, like a strong left or right. It moved its body, like maybe it could move its neck somewhat, but it looked like it had to shift more its body to turn. And that's one detail that I noticed with some sighting. They mention that, or they say it's hard for apes to move their neck as freely as we can, that they have to just turn their body more. And so that also, just those little details just kept confirming and adding on and adding on and adding on. It's like, either the person really understood ape behavior and anatomy, but again, I just seeing all those details, it just I have no other explanation.
Gotcha. What did you do? I apologize. You may have said this already. So what did you do as soon as that was over with? What did you do? The encounter.
After the encounter, I went running back to my friends, and my siblings were outside, and I tried to tell them about what I saw. They didn't believe me. And it was soon going to get dark, so we went in, and I went in immediately afterwards, and I hated that my bed was close to the window facing towards that area, so that was horrific for me. I actually did sleep with my parents even, and eventually when I went back to my room, still I would just have these images as I shut my eyes of that thing looking up, because my bed was attached to, or right next to the window. Like if I just look up, boom, there's the window. And I just would think that thing would be standing there looking down at me. Even with the blind, like I was paranoid that it would just be right there. And I would have always nightmares for a while, days, maybe even a month or two. But yeah, that's what I can immediately remember.
Is there anything else that you feel that you think is important, or anything that you wanna say about it?
Well, I mean, that point afterwards, I was just kind of in a research hole, and you know, and ever since, like when I was in wooded areas, I just kind of kept my eyes peeled. You know, I just never knew. Maybe I might see something again. I don't know. My family had this acre of land, and which is a little bit more on the rural side of that, near the town. And I would constantly, even then, when we would be driving, I kept my eyes on the woods, always just looking. It was in my mind, like if I could have a chance to see that again. Especially keeping up with reports, and if I was near those areas, could there be a chance I could see it again? I'm not sure, but I just was much more alert going into the woods and maybe close to areas that I knew there was an encounter.
Gotcha.
So when you go back and you look at all the reports online that have been documented, was there a spike of sightings at the time when you saw it?
That's what I learned a little afterwards, that during that period of time, and it was of that year in 99, just like maybe there were 2, maybe 3 top sightings that happened in that area right around that time. I can't say that's the same exact thing that, you know, of what they saw that is what I saw, but I do find it interesting that it was during that same time that there were other people that had seen it as well. So it's more things that keep adding on to making me realize, no, there was something.
Gotcha. And what was the exact year that this happened?
99.
1999.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you were about 6 or 7.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then you moved out. Let me think. You moved out of Florida
In like 2007.
2007. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is fine for now. We have tortured the poor boy enough.
No, that's fine. And of course, I have
Mhm.
no, I mean to show no disrespect for his emotions. I absolutely believe he encountered something for real. I absolutely believe that the event actually happened. I believe the emotions are real. I believe the memories are real. But as both of you know, um, I like to consider myself a healthy skeptic. Well, Jonathan quoted that Sherlock quote about, well, if you remove all other possibilities, whatever's left behind, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Well, likewise, I would invoke the famous quote that um, uh, uh, extreme or major claims demand extreme or major evidence. Like, you can't make a big claim without big evidence to support it. And so for me, and I'm not just talking about John's experience, I'm talking about just in general, this applies to the world of cryptozoology in general. But in this case, Bigfoot in particular, I feel that overall, the evidence has been tantalizing at best, but often leaving much to be desired, and at least not being sufficient to open up my mind to the possibility that, yeah, it's at least reasonable to suppose that there's Bigfoot. I don't even think that's reasonable, but I would like it to be reasonable, and I am genuinely hoping that you guys will change my mind. But in the meantime, please bear with me as I play the devil's advocate. Yeah, I'm just trying to find the truth. I'm not trying to attack or discredit anyone's feelings or opinions.
Fair enough.
If I may,
Mhm.
honestly, like if I, you know, if I didn't see what I saw, I mean, I would pretty much be like Evan. I'm very
Mm.
skeptical of things, especially having gone deep into paleontology and understanding these things. I'm very skeptical. The Loch Ness monster. We've there have been so many attempts to try to find that thing. It's supposed to breathe air. You would have
Yeah.
seen that. Out of all these cryptids and all these stories, like I pretty much for 99% of them, maybe 98 if I'm being generous, I don't really buy them. I honestly don't. Um, to me, when it comes to Bigfoot, Yeti, or what have you, any variant, is for me the most plausible out of the whole bunch. Just because things like that have existed. We have evidence of that a few thousands of years, like it. I'm not saying it is it, like it. But I'm much more inclined. And, obviously with what I saw, I'm like, well, there it is. Kind of hard to for anyone that shows skepticism, all I can say is I saw what I saw. I mean, I don't, that's all I can say. And it just seems to fit that description the most. I mean, if there is some other explanation, I'm willing to listen, because at the same time, I don't want this to be just, oh, because it was such an experience and it impacted me. You know, if it was something else, so be it. I mean, there's so much that it would have to take, but I don't want to be emotionally, just like, oh, there's no possible way that it was something else. If somehow it was, it is what it is. I am very skeptical of things as well, but like I said, I saw what I saw.
Hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. Especially, I can imagine how this experience would make you feel after the fact.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Evan's seen that when we went camping and fossil hunting.
yeah. No, I find fascinating the thing that got me into cryptids was Nessie when I was a little kid, and I think it was an episode on Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, I loved Unsolved Mysteries.
We might have watched the same episode, Steve.
Yeah,
I-
that's it. I remember the reenactment of this like thing like hopping along a road that they're like, oh, then it got in Loch Ness, you know. And I remember Nessie.org, was it, or Nessie.com when I was a kid. I don't know if that's still there, but
Oh wow.
I remember they got a line of boats to like scan the entire Loch Ness.
Yes.
Hmm.
Which
yes.
now as an adult, I'm like, I cannot believe that they took it that seriously, that they spent that much money to scan the lake, you know, and they found nothing. But then of course it was like, oh well, there's caves,
Oh yeah.
you know. But then I remember watching a documentary on, it was like, look, it's, if there's something there, it's not a plesiosaur. And they're like, if it is there, it's a thing that walks on the ground, that walks on the ocean floor and has a head that pops up and down. They're like, but that doesn't make sense. And
Mhm.
that was kind of when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not happening.
Right. You see that I can even
Yeah.
in my critical thinking, I was like, okay, like that a small area is not enough for, you know, there has to be enough food, you know, it has to be coming out of the water to breathe. Like you would be seeing that thing so often. So with that, even just critical thinking, I was like, okay, I can. I love the idea of Nessie. I mean, I love dinosaurs. I love aquatic reptiles. I love all of that. But even then, I couldn't, you know, entertain that idea.
Yeah.
So even with that, even with all these other cryptids, I'm like, just thinking about, you know, the ecology and just their size, and I was like, no, I really doubt that. But with this one, I can justify a bit more. It's more plausible to me. So I'm like Evan, but has seen it. So at that point, I'm like, well, I don't
What
know
am I
else to
supposed to do?
I'm like, I'm trying to think where, if you are real, where do I put you in the phylogenetic tree? I'm trying to think, where do you belong in all of this? I don't know, but I want to know. And I saw, like, again, I sound like a broken record, but I saw what I saw. I have no other explanation.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, thank you again for sharing. You know, it's that's one commonality I find, is that it has a lasting experience on people.
Extremely.
Um,
It's still, it just put me in the right sitting in the woods at night, then I'm horrified.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing with us. I'm not going to keep you guys any longer. I know it's probably late.
No, it's quite all right.
It's fine. And thanks for, you know, taking the time. Like I said, I haven't told any of my friends besides maybe Evan and his sister. Yeah, I mean, aside from that, I haven't really told anyone else. So you're one of the very few.
No, you guys have a good night.
Likewise,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. You guys have a good night. And in between now and whenever we talk again, if any of you sees anything unusual, for the love of God, pull out your camera and keep it steady.
We'll do our best.
Yeah.
All right. Peace out.
All right. Good night,
Take
guys.
care. Bye.
Bye.